Okay, welcome in the audience. Those of you who may have viewed a couple of days ago on Tuesday, we have a continuation of a program that was begun there with our two guests. One of which is on my far left is Randolph Corbitt, and he bills himself again as the mortgage fraud victim. And on my immediate left is Berg, or Freddie Berg, J. Berg, Esquire attorney, and we've been talking about the mortgage fraud, the mortgage situation, and in a broader context, the Occupy Wall Street, Occupy World situation that seems characteristic of the time. Gentlemen, welcome back to a continuation of what we spoke about on Tuesday. We were sort of getting down to where there's a whole lot of things blowing in the wind. Bobby Dylan wrote a song. He was really in touch with the zeitgeist at the time, about 1970, it seems to me. He wrote a song, said, there's something blowing in the wind.
Yes, I remember
There's
that.
something big, there's something going on. And I wonder, is it possible for us to think about these times as a time that is, in a certain sense, in a design sense or in a very large tableau, a unique moment in evolutionary terms now? Is it possible for us to get out to understanding the human condition outside of just the normally perceived dialectical political history of the world that we're accustomed to calling the news? Is there something existentially significant occurring now as we sit and talk on this January of the year 2011 or not? How large a tableau can we get to try to understand what's going on that has been revealed to our investigation of this mortgage business that you're both very familiar with and so forth?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to understand is that those people that they previously considered primitive are intellectually sophisticated to understand that there is something wrong with the way the system is operating. It is destroying their culture, it is destroying their lives, it is destroying Mother Earth, and they're saying, and we are finally beginning to recognize that the truth in what they're saying. We cannot continue to destroy the earth if we ourselves intend to remain on the earth. Okay, so we are now trying to get back in terms of evolution to the beginning, where we had a greater respect for life, where we had a greater respect for Mother Earth, and we recognize that we cannot continue, for example, to destroy the trees, because the trees are responsible for turning the carbon dioxide into air. So if we destroy all the trees, what are we going to breathe?
Yeah, with all due respect, I wonder if that's true. There's some people who are nested in, we're here as a species, we begin to understand things intellectually, certainly since the Enlightenment, it got, and everything, but we begin to understand now things in a way that is a very, like a quickening. Every day comes a transom over the revolution over the transom from every field, like a quickening of intellectually understanding things in a way that humanity has not had. And we know now that we're all African. We're all out of Africa. 200,000 years ago, our species appeared. 4 to 7 million years ago, there were no Homo sapiens with a self-reflective consciousness. There was Australopithecine up the hominoid line. We had to go through a punctuated equilibrium experience with the emergence of Homo habilis. And then out of that, we appeared 200,000 years. So what I'm suggesting is that this may be, I did a program with Isaac Asimov one time. He said, this is the defining generation of the whole evolution of consciousness in universe. Because the extension of our consciousness, which is tool and technology, have been characteristic of our consciousness, along with the self-reflective ability to understand the larger issues. That's pretty unique. But that process has been, since agriculture 10,000 years ago, and empires, has been at the service of the creating of military dominance by one group over another, called realpolitik. Mao said, power comes out of the end of a gun. If you've got the Gatling gun, you can conquer India. That kind of thing. So, and that's called realpolitik. It still holds. Who's got the power wins and controls. And that reached a point where, I just make a suggestion, we could key off, that those weapons became ever more, out of our intellectual capability to manipulate matter and so forth, became ever more destructive, to where by 1970, about 1970, most of the modeling shows, the weapons that exist, not the inflection points of theory or things like that, the weapons that exist became species lethal. That they were, about 1970 is the time when the weapons became species lethal, which is an existential new reality in the universe in terms of the broader evolution of consciousness. We can now wipe out not only the tribe in the other village or win, but we can wipe out the evolution of consciousness itself. After 3.8 billion years of evolutionary process on this planet, within this universe. This is the defining generation, so I'm wondering, we also have a technologically augmented capability of taking care of everybody through good design, ephemeralization, doing more with less, being able to maybe perhaps transcend modeling that Fuller and some others came up with, that we were transcending. There were greater numbers of haves and have-nots in the world. You can measure things like that in terms of our capability, and we got to about 10%. You're going hyperbolic at 20% by the Second World War, 10% for First World War. He, in 52, he said we had a 20-year period of imminent crisis from 1952 to where we were destined to cross the 50% mark in terms of the number of haves and have-nots in the world. At the level of capability, he said he lived out his life thinking we crossed that line about the same year, 1970. That was the year of Woodstock. That was the year that was motivating the Earth in a kind of really major way. We were, in a certain sense, transcending, at a design level, scarcity. That had been the context, the ontologic context in which all of human society had evolved. I didn't mean to go into that, but it might be a place to begin to think about this in a design sense, this mortgage thing and everything. It's like a quickening in a pregnancy, and it's a quickening that is signaling a qualitative, almost speciation moment, or a moment of leaving the context we've been in, and we're going to come into a new relationship in the universe, perhaps through a liberated humanity that never has been able to realize its full potential, can be seen to be able to do that in the time ahead, and so forth. So can you see things in those terms, and can we take these things about the mortgage mess and the inappropriateness of the inherited institutions out of one context that has not been able to make the transition that relates to the future? If you can understand what I'm trying to get at. Or is that too large?
No,
or
no. Let me say this, Farrell. First of all, understand that the concept of being able to wipe out every man on the planet as a result of warfare, that concept has also come to the realization that the future wars are not going to be done with guns, tanks, and airplanes. They're going to be done with economic institutions of money, currency wars, manipulation of stocks and bonds to subvert the economy of other countries. We will not have wars with guns anymore.
Well,
it's a new concept.
That's just another ripple.
Go ahead.
That actually might be a good thing.
Well,
that makes sense.
But it depends on who's going to have control of the currency is part of the war that's coming.
But with all due respect, the real existential danger isn't that. There would be the real existential danger is that would create conditions that would lead to, because unleashing the weapons, it would mean the weapons of this country. It's not a rational thing. It doesn't fit into anything rational. It would lead to conditions that would lead to the unleashing of those weapons. It's only the weapons that are existentially significant. There would be a few survivors in New Guinea or something, even if all the currencies went. Do you understand? I'm just saying that's the ultimate thing that is different. And also the transcending of scarcity. That we don't have a system that allows us to do what we're capable of doing is something that we now have a capability that we have not had historically to liberate everybody and the ecology in a way that simply has not been characteristic of any moment in history until now. That's the point.
I think that we have always had the ability to feed more people than we've ever wanted to, or the powers ever wanted. They want scarcity, because out of scarcity comes control. The idea of being
you're slipping into politics.
Okay, we can talk politics if you want. It's not only politics, it's also economics. Because if I can control the amount of food that you eat, I also can control you and what you will do.
We got this friend Roger, the forensic guy.
Yeah, we know about
that. He said they're just trying to reduce it down to everybody's going to be a slave.
Okay, and we're talking economics again. We're not talking about a gun to make you a slave. No, because Malcolm said, listen, if I put bars in front of you, you will fight to get them. But if I put in place in your mind that you belong there, I can walk away. You will stay there. So the issue of, if I can say to you, look, I have the bread. Do you want to eat? You will say, okay, Fred, I'm sorry. I want to eat.
Well, one thing.
Okay, so the question of, are we moving towards a new humanity? I think that's what's actually happening. I don't think the idea that people are simply saying, "The heck with you" anymore. It's about us now. You see that in Wall Street. You see that when you walk down there and talk to them. There's a whole new mental of humanity down there that people are saying, "Look, why should we continue to struggle to get a new car every year? What do I even need the car for?"
Well,
I can take a bicycle. I can walk.
Well, that's
that's a whole new paradigm that we're moving into. The idea of what we need as opposed to what we believe we need. Well, is what's happening with motivating society.
Likewise, economics is defined as the allocation of the production and allocation of scarce resources. The idea that there can be enough. There is enough.
Yes.
There never has been, in an algorithmic sense, or in an ontologic sense, enough for all and the ecology.
I think I disagree. I think that when up until the 50s, I think there was enough. I think in the 50s, when corporations began to harness the power to grow, is where the greatest scarcity started. Because people before used to live on tiny little farms where they could raise their own food. They had the ability to heat their own home. There wasn't the need for everything that we have today. Everybody got an iPod. Everybody's got a computer. Everybody's trying to have a car. Everybody's trying.
Yeah, well,
there is a point where you have to say, do I need it?
Yeah, let Mr. Berg talk for a while. We see things a little differently.
Not that I see things differently. I just want to add a couple of things to the mix. First of all, there's a little bit of a tendency, I notice it myself, where I grew up appreciating, and even I look for science fiction. So and there were science fiction writers who were actually trying to be very good predictors of what the future would be like.
Your futurists also,
right? Yeah. And the whole thing about, I hadn't heard of any recent discussion about currency wars, but that, I'm a pacifist, and that would be great news to me. If there are people that are fighting over currencies, not killing over it, but I guess the second thing I wanted to kind of add to this mix is that. The internet. I'm also linguist with some background in my background, and there was I was worked part of my work involved putting together the very early levels of the consumer, what's called the consumer internet, when it was kind of passed on from the military sector, which is where DARPA and all that stuff. Yeah. But and there's been this a lot of people were concerned that just as with kind of growth of telecommunications, that languages were dying out, native small but I think that and I've been surprised a little bit that what's happened is there's an ability now seemingly of creating new languages through some of the technologies. Yes, and it actually is a very big philosophical contribution.
It's a philosopher's stone. If you can translate the languages of the world one to another, it would be great.
And just being able to come up with new means of
autonomically.
Right. New means of communication, new skills, new communication skills. Yeah. I've seen a little bit of it in some movies recently, where I almost get the feeling that that some of the actors some of the role, part of the role is, you know, communicating now in light of, you know, text messaging and emailing and being able to, you know, gain people. You'd be, you know, if you
I cannot keep up with
if you had kids and watched them play Xbox and all these other, you know, they're communicating with other people. You know, and it's a whole different world. You know, for what you know, someone like me who's, you know, kind of you know, old-fashioned in that respect of just using it as a tool, as a work tool.
In the dark ages.
Oh, please. But guys, you also
know is modern.
There's also a large trend to capture some of the lost languages and dialects across the country also. So it's not that all about the new.
History projects, for example.
It's not only about the new, it's about respect for the past.
Well, that is
some people are also trying to realize that how in balance with nature and society those people really were. And they keep saying, why are you trying to tell me look, you know, in the Nevada desert, if you go out there, there are tons, thousands, hundreds of thousands of old airplanes, of old tanks, of old Jeeps that are just simply rusting away that we purchased. And people are saying, for what?
Well, it was
for what?
Well, I think it's, if you look at it, it seems to me, if you go ever since the civilization, the main thing that the political class wanted out of the intellectual community, Da Vinci was celebrated by the Medicis not because he could paint beautiful paintings, the works of civilization. He made a siege machine that gave them an advantage over the other tribe. And that gave the political entity the advantage to go and conquer the other tribe and then steal their grain and whatever,
people and whatever.
And then it was a power in terms of manipulating human conscience and everything, was what gave a entity or a people the power to set up what they think is a system that is adequate, or you know, Rome beneficial for 1,000 years. You had the kings of England for 1,000 years after that, and their idea was historical legitimacy. We are legitimate. They are not. So they can, and it's called realpolitik. It still holds, does it not?
Yes.
Does it hold?
I mean, the concept of democracy over other countries that are viewed as, quote, less democratic, that's the same concept, that we are more right than you.
Yeah, and apparently
and the weapons that we have.
And what is the model by which the world is operating now? Isn't it some sort of a remake or a redo or something like that of essentially what came out of the Enlightenment in Europe? It came out of the Enlightenment in Europe, uniquely. You know, Adam Smith, 1776, steam engine, industrial revolution, wealth of nation, United States of America with an experiment in terms of the way a society, and they've got a system that more or less, has it not, it's been variegated, but more or less the world as a whole, because then you get all of the Keynesian stuff, you got the Bretton Woods, you know, the idea of economics. Economic theorizing is mostly all Western European, you know, from Schumpeter to Friedman to Keynes or whatever.
And I've always said that
that is thought of, that system that they have is thought of as historically legitimate.
Well, I also think that it's created.
Wall Street is telling us the basic premises at a design level by which they form, let's just say form capital, distribute demand, create institutions, is inadequate to what the future requires for survival, and perhaps even for requires for a liberation and an opening upon a hugely seen renaissance of renaissance, liberation of the whole human society. To be born in that moment is, if that is the case, and it seems to be there's evidence for that, is an incredible responsibility, and it's something that the people are falling down on the job. We've got all the king's horses and all the king's men. They've not come up with a system that resonates to what the future allows or requires if we're to evolve, if we're to avoid wiping out conscious evolution in the universe and allow for the liberation of everybody, of the human society within an ecological context.
They don't want to liberate everybody.
No, you see, you're getting into the political thing.
It's also,
you're looking at who to blame.
I'm not looking for who to blame. It's a reality. No. They do not believe that everybody on the face of this earth deserves to be here. No, there are individuals who believe that there are too many people and that 1/3 of this of the world needs to be eliminated. eliminated.
Yeah, and a lot of that goes along racial lines. They have things they can wipe out the black people because they're not there. You know, all of
we understand that.
These are all the myths of history.
Have their good and bad.
Yeah,
honestly,
here comes the voice of reason.
No, it's not a voice of reason.
It's just another point
to the mix since we're talking about these. I mean, one benefit you could say from the the communist rule of the Soviet Union. Remember that entity called the Soviet Union, and even Mao's China, was that there was a intense literacy campaign.
Okay.
So you had whole continents, millions, billions of people who were I know there were bad sides of that. Come on. All the little purges and everything.
Yes, re-education camps and all that.
Right, but there was a massive literacy campaign. And what that did is it gave people a way, a further ability to communicate the values and aspects of their cultural systems that we didn't have, and now we're able to access that information very quickly and learn about it, and so we're integrating that. I think what we're witnessing here with the Wall Street campaign, and even on both sides of the
Wall Street occupation,
right, the Wall Street occupation, and the various responses from the factions, the Tea Party, whatever it is, these are conversations about priorities. The problem is there's a lot of people who are very stressed out over productivity. People that can't find work, that feel they want to be productive every day, that they can contribute, that they can do things, but they don't. They don't fall into what we grew up with in the 20th century, where traditional jobs, where you go to an office somewhere, or a plant, a factory, or even a small business, and you get a paycheck. Things have changed radically.
Keynes said in a letter to his grandchildren in 1930, that was in the depths of the Depression, he wrote a letter to his grandchildren. He said, he set up all the Bretton Woods, as you know.
Right.
Nixon and Friedman both said we're all Keynesian now, 1972. That's the economic order. That's the thinking that has been there, demand side.
People forget that Nixon had price controls.
He did.
Listen, he was a bureaucracy person, no question.
He said you're going to be, the children of that time are in their maturity, the grandchildren, his letter to his grandchildren, are going to be confronted with something that's very hard to understand. He said it's going to be massive, technologically induced unemployment. There's going to be a tremendous productive capability, technologically based, that is not going to require employment of people. Now, the only way we can get to economic theory is informing all of this, really. That's what the courts are about. That's the only thing that matters, is that, the only way that they have, by and large, if you think across the world, the capital assets that reflect the technology, the ownership of the capital assets, is so narrowly held, it's almost ridiculous. I mean, it's a tiny plutocratic class in every political entity. Here in the United States, the distribution of income, it's all going to the top. If Mr. Rogers is right, it'll all go to a few people who own everything and have everything, and there'll be no demand. But he said there will be technologically induced unemployment, and the only way they have to distribute, let's just say in a simple supply-demand, demand to the people, is through them being like a serf on a feudal estate where the assets are all owned by a tiny plutocratic class like kings. And that's accepted. That's accepted in the normal.
But that's only if you feed into it. For example, people are now saying, for example, I don't need this credit card. They're cutting up credit cards by the thousands. They're taking their money out the banks by the hundreds of thousands. They are talking about a redistribution of the wealth by the people without the consent of the 1%. That's the total difference about the way society is being reorganized. The people are taking responsibility for their own wealth and well-being, and saying
Roger's wrong that the people are going to end up being serfs.
Okay, I think only if we continue to follow the model that's laid out there. But if people begin to say, for example, I'm not taking this credit card. For example, myself, I don't have a credit card. I haven't had a credit card for 15 years, but I get along just fine. I have no debts. I have no debts, and no one's going to be ringing the phone, Randy, you owe them. I know plenty of people who are now saying, what do I need this credit card? You sold me a bill of goods that this credit card was going to be to my benefit. I believe you. They are questioning the values that we were told to accept.
He wants to keep it political. I understand. And you want to keep it political.
Money is politics. Money is politics.
But what I was talking about, he was talking at a level beyond that. Okay, they're looking at a thing that is systemic. It's not just a bunch of bad guys or something. It's that we're all caught up in it. that we've got view, and with this you get the economic theorizing. Nobody seems to question the idea that you have to have some sort of way of relating the mass of the people democratically. Let's just say, use a dirty word, private property.
Okay.
That's something people fight over.
Okay, but that's a new concept that came along within the last 100 years. There was no private property, especially here to some of the indigenous people. You could go from one part of the world all the way to the other. Before the British busted into India and Pakistan, that was all one span of land.
You've been spending too much time in the library, young man, learning. You're learning too much, Larry. No,
they didn't have that. But the minute you create a partition, you create an additional government, it becomes like any institution. It has its own self-value, and it's going to continue to fight to perpetuate it. When you destroy that line that separates people, it changes. It changes, and that's why many people right now, to this very day, are demanding the United States, unfortunately, get the heck out of South Korea and let the Koreans figure out what the peninsula should look like.
Okay. Yeah, well, okay, but that's not, he said it would be technologically.
But it doesn't make him right.
No,
because he said it doesn't make it right. Okay. And it doesn't mean that we absolutely
we can continue to have wage slavery.
No. We can opt out. Listen,
it's perfectly all right for a small group to own all the technological instruments,
we can
all the buildings, all the streets, all the capital.
How we can opt out, the people
are saying.
How are you
opt out?
People are simply saying.
Live in a forest or something? You go back to.
I guarantee you, there are more people trying to go back to farms than are people trying to get into the cities.
There may be.
There are certainly more.
People going back to family.
Am I right? There are more people trying to move into farms.
Okay, you got this.
The frontier theory in American history has, we are fortunate.
What was his name?
Yeah. That we have that. That that we have this great, vast, continent. Really,
listen, the idea that we have is another huge issue because we took it from people, and where those people are today.
Right, that's right.
Okay, we got to deal. We must deal with the fact that what we call ours belong to someone else.
Well, George thought everything should own natural resources should be owned by everybody. Again, the Indians were able to be conquered by the people who had the technological instruments, and the capital assets are owned by a tiny plutocratic class.
But the Indians contribute to their own demise by simply being so beneficial and loving to allow their enemy in. Had they been warrior-like to those very same people when they tried to come here?
Some of them were warrior-like, but they were outgunned.
Yes.
They were outgunned.
Before they got the guns in, they could have squashed it.
Well, anyway, we're trying to talk economic theory in the institution.
People would say that's natural selection, right?
That's natural. People would see that down.
Being outgunned is part of natural selection, right?
Okay.
That's how people would do it.
It's survival of the fittest.
Right.
They would see it as a competitive thing. Some people benefit, and But the point is, I'm trying to get to economics because that's what is going with the course. We were talking about mortgage fraud.
Yes.
All of this. It's money. It's money and income and economic theory. And what is the economic theory that informs us and so what? And he brought that up. And it's around the institution of why do we allow all capital assets to be owned by a tiny class?
I think we fell into that. We fell into that concept that the things were going right, and that we were taught and believed that if we gave our labor to these institutions, those institutions would create employment and take care of us. Okay. We fell into that. Well, now people are simply saying, "Wait a minute. Okay, a lot of us about a bill of goods." Okay. And so now we're turning around and saying, "What else can we do other than continue to work?"
You talked a lot. Okay, you've done that. Now, let's say the progressive community. The progressive community has been, and that would go over to socialists, communists, progressive people, democratically inclined people, the Democratic Party and all that sort of thing. They have all been informed by the labor theory of value. That, that all production is human labor. They're singing the praises of labor. They've been co-opted into where they sing that labor is so important because then they could get a minimum wage and maybe more wages, they get a little more money, you could build a middle class, and they was co-opted into that. Keynes was saying it's the technology that is creating the wealth, and it's private property. And it's okay for you to own all that stuff. We'll want to have a job on your estate. and they're producing all the wealth. And why don't we think about democratizing you have something that would include private property, include the capital. Naomi Klein writes well on economics. She wants a balance, not all at once, not an all Soviet. They did away with private property, because it was an evil institution. Didn't work. You had all power in one thing. But you have a thing. Why don't we have something that's going to democratize the way capitalists form, so that the people have a way of having income from a technologically oriented productive system, so that they would have the ability to have income to buy and clear the market of what is able to be produced? Why do we limit it all to a small group of people? Why do we have such an economic plutocracy accepted by the progressive intellectual community as somehow saying, let's just create a lot of jobs, y'all keep we just bailed the banks all out, y'all do it. Y'all do it, but they got no way of democratizing capital ownership.
They have a vested stake in keeping.
No, why don't you talk a little bit?
No, I'm just saying what we've done is we've institutionalized that in some ways. With just legally, in the legal world, what's happened? It's that some of these things have become institutionalized in nature, where these things, questions of capital and and corporations. Suddenly they're recognized as political persons.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I hate to bring this up because it doesn't come up in any conversations, but voting rights is like off the table. I grew up in, I was the last year of the Vietnam draft.
Yeah.
Knock on wood, my number was high, but but really, I have not heard a discussion about voting rights since before 2008 at all. Occasionally, I see something in the papers. I get some stuff from certain organizations, but it is off the table. I don't know what happened to that.
Yeah.
I mean, really, if your political participation is based on how much money you give, where does that leave us?
Well, it's united. It's been challenged. You think Move to Amend might be able to get off ground? Maybe that thing equates.
But I really see that as like an issue. When you talk about democratic capitalism, which is what our system is. I like to think
it's democratic plutocracy. It's not democratic.
I know.
It's plutocratic. It is not democratic. It should be democratic, and the way capitalists form should be owned generally by everybody as a way of allowing for there to be distribution of buying power to the people, rather than wage slavery, because it's now coming that, and they're all going to be turning into serfs, and so that's my thought, and that's what they're going to have a design of a system that's going to be able to allow people, you should be moving toward a thing where people are comfortably leisured, so that they can then be concerned with the things that really matter, which have to do with all the goods of civilization, taking good care of the baby, taking good care of the daughter that's got an emotional problem, taking good care that there's good music being made, what they want to do, rather than being treated like robots on a feudal estate that are, like they're being treated now. And we don't have anything coming from the progressive community except, let's let them own it all, and we'll be willing slaves on their estate. I mean, it seems that way to me. It's the progressive intellectuals that are to fault for not coming up with an alternative. Is it Marx? Karl Marx? Do we come with that? What do you think? What do we suggest?
I'm not sure
what do we suggest for how we're going to organize the world economy? And on the basis of what theoretical understanding of the larger context, which is the realm of the intellectuals. It's the intellectuals are falling down on the job, and all the king's horses and all the king's men and all the financing and everything of our universities, being co-opted, being all specialized, they've not come up with an answer. They've not come up with an ability.
I'll tell you, from what's happened on the university campuses is what I was kind of saying earlier, is that we have people graduating with huge student loans, with even associate's degrees. And so they don't have time to work to be creative. And I think that it's even in the public systems that where are the creative classes, if you want to call them that, they don't have time anymore. They're more concerned. They're stressed out over the economy, over issues.
Everything is money.
Credit cards. It's like how many conversations do I have during the day about someone who tell me they manage to handle 2 or 3 hours of phone calls over credit cards, in the morning, and we're able to, like, get their head back in the right place, for the rest of the day. It's like, and to listen to some people talk about them, it's like, anything you say can and will be used against you. You feel like you're in jail over credit. No, it shouldn't be that way.
It's why
it should be that should be a liberating thing for people. That should be, that should be a way to create short-term capital. I think that was the intention of
it. Was back
I don't think so.
But the reality is that it's not.
He's got a view that there's these bad guys.
It was designed to put people in. That was the whole thing.
Well, that was creative. They used to have creative accounting. Remember Bialystock and Bloom? Creative,
right.
That kind of thing.
If you get locked up on labels, then you're locked in. Don't you understand?
Yeah, but what's the point you're trying to make? Bad guys. Who are the bad guys?
The point is quite simple. That when credit cards were designed, they were sold to people as a way of allowing them to extend their money purchasing power and until a better time so they could pay it off. But ultimately,
think of what you just said.
Listen.
Yeah, but think of what you just said.
Okay, let me put it this way. I want to buy that car, that coat, that shoes. I don't have the money. I'll take the credit and I'll use it until such time as I get the money to pay it off.
Yeah,
but wait a minute.
Stop right there. Suppose you take, instead of a consumer attitude, suppose you do it toward the enterprise attitude. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to make an investment on a road that's going to connect here. Investment is going to be made, and we do it all out of past savings. We don't do anything. But a business proposition is you're going to make an investment in something that's going to pay for itself, pay self-liquidating out of its future earnings. You're a bet on the future. It's a bad business. You're not going to go out and you're not going to go invest in something that's going to bring productive goods, service, or whatever if it's not going to be successful, right?
Okay.
So that's a different proposition.
Let me answer.
We have to have a different relationship to the future.
The fact
you're just
is,
leaving it all to consumption.
but the fact
they should be in on the productive assets.
Let me finish. If you can take a business venture and you put capital out on the assumption that you're going to make a profit and be able to pay for it in the future, but it fails, and then you can turn around and take it off your income tax as a business venture, you did not literally stick anything of yours out there.
Back to where we were talking about.
You actually invested or ventured the public's capital.
Well, that's getting back to the very.
That was not your capital. That was the public's capital. So don't confuse the issues.
Is the public sector? You got two things. You got a public sector, private sector. Private sector, corporate, profit, private sector, government, tax, and they can regulate, and they can spend, and the public sector. That's the normal way in which we see everything. The civil society is in the middle, and what's happening is that you have to have some sort of a way where you're not going to have all of the wealth in one group that is technological and is betting on the future. It gets back to the derivatives. I don't think the derivatives were such a bad thing that they did, but what you have to do, it should be within the government. There should be a thing.
Regulation.
There should be regulation, but there should be a thing. It's not there. Why we accept it, I don't know. Why we allowed it. It should be right next to the Federal Reserve. It should be capital diffusion. Capital diffusion. The diffusion ownership of capital should be democratically irrigating the whole society, the way you form the capital, as a way of distributing income so they don't have to be fighting against robotization and other kinds of things that can displace them, so that they then will be able to have buying power the same way the people who have business do it. And the left accepts it. That's what I'm saying. If we're coming from the left, we're liberating for the people who are being discriminated against by the powerful, which is the banking. And what happened with the
insurance companies,
the mortgage thing and all that. There should be weapons that can put some power into the public, into the people against the vested interest. But they have to then come up with some sort of way. How are we going to organize the world that got us into this, outside of that can include everybody, liberate the people, ecologically involved, and then also include the people who are responsible for the outdated institutions that will be subsumed, and then we will be in a thing where everybody will go, and we may get into a liberated order, an opening on the future that is now available. It's like opening up is available to us, and we don't have a system that lets us do it. We're just coming into a thing where the old systems are being reified in the name of politics, and we're heading for disaster.
Okay, you talk about risk. Okay?
That's Occupy Wall Street.
Okay, for example, when we said before that if you're in a business, okay, and you reach out to make an investment and the investment don't pay, then you turn around. Normally what it is, you should lose your capital, but we don't allow that to happen.
Well, it can happen.
Okay, but that was supposed to happen, but you don't. You take it off your income tax. Therefore, now in terms of the mortgage fraud, you said there should be some ways that the public can have a recourse against that. The answer is that on the books there are thousands of statutes that could have punished these guys and put them in jail to make sure that the next guy who came behind him wouldn't take that risk. The risk was mitigated by the simple fact that nobody went to jail. Nobody went to jail. That's why they continue.
That whole process of the derivatives.
Not only the I think we should give some credit, and I really do think that here in New York City, our U.S. Attorney,
the
Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney here, they have worked very hard on some very key prosecutions. Some of them have not been that widely reported, but they hit some key people who were really acting fraudulently in some of these things. So I think some credit has to be given there, but it still doesn't help when the public face of what we hear, right? And people that are acting in like where we on the last show where we saw someone admitting they've signed 400 signatures in 1 hour, on 6
days a week,
right? So knowingly signed documents that he knew were going to be used for fraud. I mean, come on, there's something like. And
he wasn't prosecuted. No one of the people who fulfilled the organization, nor was the corporation or anybody in the corporation. The LPS, like I was getting ready to say, their job was to create phony documents. They made $2 million. So my point is,
this whole other world of the.
If you are not going to prosecute, even though you have the laws and all the people and the power to prosecute, and if you're not prosecuting the people, you talk about risk. There is no risk. Well, you've taken away the risk. If they thought that they were going to be prosecuted, they would have stopped.
Well, one thing I think, if you democratize the ownership, the risk is, venture is one thing. Risk
that's a different thing.
That's true.
Venture is totally different. Fraud is a difference.
Well, no, not fraud. I'm just saying right up the risk ladder. There's risk. There's minimal risk. Some things are very certain.
Yes.
Some things are and can be certain within an economic order that's really wrong. And then
government bonds.
You can get to the things where there's risk. It's called venture.
Yes.
So that's a different thing. They turned the whole thing into a venture crapshoot.
Yeah.
The derivatives. By having an insurance thing.
They had a certain thing there. There was no risk there because you knew that
you had insurance. And you had risk.
No. It wasn't just the insurance, but they knew that the insurance could not cover all those policies you wrote.
You don't understand the distinction between the thing is that the ownership of all that insurancing and that business is a tiny class.
Yes, we know that.
Why haven't we democratized that? If you do, then you have to have something that is not going to be able to be a big crapshoot. They got a crapshoot.
The reason is, Harold, that
because we have not given them incentive to set up a system that can liberate people from wage slavery. Because we're all tuned into how wonderful it is to work. We get our egos wiped up in this, and they've tied us around their finger they manipulated us into where we don't think that there's anything other than the value of getting a job.
How up
the labor theory of value
79,
right. Does it not?
Yes.
Does it not?
Absolutely.
And it's out of date.
But up until 79, things were going things were going well up until 79 until they started the deregulation. When they brought in the deregulation is when everybody's jobs, value of their jobs, stagnant or wages went down. Their profits went up. The idea should have been that when you started deregulating all those things, there should have been in place penalties if you did something fraudulent. And there was, but none of them was talking about it.
I'm talking at a different level.
Some key aspects about the vernacular. You mentioned certain terms and everything. There's something we use the term, the phrase profit motive. We don't just say people are profit takers. We say there's a profit motive, which means more than just incentivize. Motivate means it's the
goal you're going
after. Right. It's emotional. It's it's practical. There's a whole lot of elements. It's not just that people want to make money. They want to make a profit. They have a profit motive in selling their goods, selling their services, or being employable.
That to become a star is an idea. Somebody wants to be a star. Tiger Woods wins the trophy.
I'm just saying it's a term of value that we attach.
It is a value that we approach on the star quality, maybe, but the mass of the body politic. They should have a system where they do not have to. The labor participation in the American economy is moving to the disappearing point. The labor input. The technology is taking over. It was complete opposite from Thomas Jefferson's day. 10% was anything other than labor. Now it's only about 10% is anything else other than technological instruments in the productive process. And we're still saying the only way to get income to people is for them to have a job, a labor.
Right.
And they're celebrating labor.
Right.
My granddaddy was a labor union organizer in Detroit and everything. But what they have to do is get a different way of distributing income and demand to the people, or else the country,
I know people don't believe it, but I was convinced. I remember in my first economics course, my first year macroeconomics course, the professor was painstakingly, and I'm still convinced of it, how our tax code is still geared as a redistribution of wealth vehicle.
There is that.
There's that aspect to it. There are some good, things that have come out of the American, century, and what is now our third century, really.
Yeah, but
and they're still good to come. But I think that,
and they will sell the work ethic.
You can't erase memories, but you can't erase experience. But there was don't forget, in the 20th century we witnessed this post-World War boom, and it was worldwide. Of culture and literacy, education, capital, and media. Internationalization. I remember I was a kid. I'm watching the Telstar broadcast from, I think it was Rome. We were, I remember, watching that on TV and thinking we're seeing, first live picture of the world.
Yes.
So it's been, there's been the sea change. I'm not just imagining.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Seeing the physical evidence.
But there's,
and where does it all stand?
For example, there are more people trying to go into their own little businesses. There are more little coffee shops. There are more little bakeries. There are more people literally got women doing their own little tiny little. People are trying to break that dependency.
Right.
You can literally see it when you go through the communities. You can see people are trying, and in addition to trying to break that labor-intense corporate control, people are trying to break away. But they also know at the same time that the people who are in power have the power of government to do regulation to stop them.
Well, okay.
You see,
that's what they're worried if they get into the corporate mindset, let's call it, that they're going to start compromising their values and they're not going to be a good person anymore.
And they're trying to break away. There are many more little shops.
Compassion, righteousness, things like that. I think you're right about that.
Yes.
Okay, let me ask you something. Right. Are you optimistic or pessimistic for the human prospect, let's say, over 10, 20, 100 years?
Personally, I'm very optimistic because I think people are trying to reach back and grab the greatest values of the past And
what about
couple
the
them,
future?
and couple them with the present and carry them to the future. I think they're going to go back to a time where they, for example, they had a reverence for the elderly, where they don't have here. Where in the United States, the biggest industry has become the nursing home. People are trying, and one of the ways that they can do that is that government, I remember when Clinton said, what we would like to do in the tax code is give $2,000 tax breaks to the person who stays home to take care of the elderly. They were fought tooth and nail. It never passed. How come you couldn't give $2,000 to someone who's taking care of the elderly, to walk them down the street? Why are you leaving them at the mercy of people coming around and snatching their pocketbooks and all? Because you're creating other jobs? It's the concept of humanity that's missing in all of this.
All right, I hear that. Yeah,
that happens. That's the first casualty.
That's it. So you would disagree with Daedalus saying history is a nightmare of injustice from which we're... Nature's red in tooth and claw. Everything's eating everything else. It isn't such a beautiful thing. Most of our time on the planet we're running away from cats that can run faster and have claws that can kill us and eat us. It isn't some beautiful thing, history. I would know. I'm more of a client that we ought to be thinking about the future. The future as the future, Nietzsche said, the future influences the past, the present as much as the past.
We got to get out the present first to get to the future.
Well, this is a big, but do you understand the challenge of living in that moment? You could have lived 200 years ago. Things
I could understand.
It's like maybe women understand it better who give birth. You come through a process. There's a process. It's developing, and then there's a quickening, and the water breaks, and then it's the time. And 9 months happens, the baby comes. We're coming to the end of the human experience.
I don't think so.
Okay. I would suggest that kind of thinking should be introduced into the thing because it's punctuated equilibrium. We're coming now to where it's a quickening. It's coming to the end of a process, and it comes right down to the razor's edge. We can stop conscious evolution.
Right.
There's been 3.8 billion years. The only place we know for sure, Carl Sagan notwithstanding, was SETI. We can stop that whole process at the extension of this thing of ours. Or is it true? Do we have a liberating capability? Is there anything to be said that there could be, maybe, ontologically, there is a little whisper. There is enough. There is enough.
That's what we're still...
There is enough. All of our institutions cry out, there's not nearly enough.
No, the institutions are spoken for by people who are put in position. It is not of the people that are saying there's not enough. The people are saying there is enough.
Okay, well then maybe the people, but you dynamic,
you got to listen to more of the people than the spokespeople.
All right, the dynamic of the Occupy Wall Street is the people and the creatures and this trying to say this, but they have to go horizontal. They have to do it. They're going to have to include economic theory. You're going to have some idea of how are you going to organize the world that is going to allow that to go. That's what's coming.
Evolution is not by design. It moves in its own way.
Well, but the ultimate challenge, you know what the ultimate challenge would be? Let's just say 100, 200 years from now, are people going to be fighting over bread? If they're here. Okay, now think about that. But the ultimate challenge for intellectuals, where are the Voltaires? Where are the intellectuals? They've fallen down on particularly the left, has fallen down on the job of coming up with a system. And you're going to have something that will be able to be liberating of the human society within an ecological... And listen, the ultimate challenge is it's going to have to be something, it's like a geodesic. It's going to go through and inform the whole. Gaia, that 100 trillion cells in the human organism, every one matters, and it's going to inform the whole, and then there will be a resonancy that will inter-accommodate us to the universe at a level transcendent to what we've been. We've got to get to, and it's going to include those responsible for the outdated institutions who haltingly must understand something that can stay their hand and bring us down to where we're going to lay us out with history, but it's going to be in a liberating way that they will be able to understand as well. That's the ultimate challenge. And it's not coming from the intellectual community, I would submit.
I think it's a little bit of a fatalistic point of view. I think
fatalistic. It's synergetic.
One of the hugest sectors that has grown, and it's probably, and we're still learning about it, is the media sector. The media. It's not just newspapers. Okay, it's different when news is broadcast, either over the radio or through some visual interaction. It's different. It really is. I think I'm not an expert, but I think you assimilate information differently when you hear it and you see a visual on it. Rather than you read it.
It's all part of the quickening.
I think, I appreciate you saying quickening, but, I think you got to view it that there's change occurs over an arc, not just,
not linear.
Sometimes there's wars and revolutions and change happens with a very finite
small. That's too small thinking.
But the real change is an arc. There's a panorama. There's
we have the luxury of doing things that way. They only let Galileo off the hook 12 years ago for saying the Catholic Church for saying we went to the center of the universe.
Right.
Change comes long. We've got a long, steady climb up Mount Sisyphus. But to have the thought that this may be that moment, it's coming. That's the thing that ought to start invading and informing the mindset of the Occupy Wall Street movement. It needs to have something other than bad-mouthing the guys who are out of date, because they in turn need that
dimensionality.
Design.
You're right about. I agree with that.
They need to have a design that can be inclusive of everyone, if we're going to have some sort of realization of what the future now allows, and just celebrate the fact we live in that time.
When you have even members of the professional class who get bogged down during daily stuff, people who get victimized by the mortgage crisis, and spend years trying to sort things out, and things like that, or anybody, there's how many with all the layoffs and stuff.
There's always a mental growth. There's a continual mental growth.
It's coming to a point.
That's the most beautiful part about it. There is a continual mental growth.
Well, yeah, but part of time, there's nothing that says
when you were talking about Mao, the level of education among the people is among the highest it's ever been.
Where?
Worldwide.
Yeah.
Literacy rate, worldwide. And with that literacy rate, it's an exchange of ideas that people never had the opportunity to get to before. So that's one of the things that we are saying, because you can't simply say that it's always going to continue. There's no thing as always.
No, the only thing that's doesn't that kind of thing promote more about humanity and politics and values
and love and respect?
Well, then let's have a world where that can become a reigning thing.
Once upon a time it was. We did not have the kind of hostility in the world today that we had 50 years ago.
We got to deal with the questions. It comes out of the mortgage thing we were talking about. One of the things, again, like the last program, is this enemy time.
Okay.
Someone once said, once you get past the Golden Gate, the Peter's Gate, what do you call it?
The pearly gates.
The pearly gates, there's no time. There's no deadlines, right? But we have a deadline with time on our program. We've run out of it. So we've been talking around it. I just think this is the most incredible time, and that it's more than finding the bad guys. And it's got to have to be a way to find the bad guys in a way that they can be included as well. I think it would be very haltingly
if they want
to understand it, because they have an interest in the way that things have been.
But do they want to be included in the new paradigm? That's the question.
That's true.
Well, do they want to be included? That's the question.
No, you're assuming that.
No, you're assuming that we have to include. But what if they don't want them? What if they want to opt out? What if they
what about blaming ourselves? Why don't we blame ourselves for not being able to think in the large, comprehensive way that is required for us to really pull it off, rather than all this politicalized?
Okay, but I believe we blame ourselves because we were taught to think a certain way and respect for authority. It is now that we're beginning to question the authority. Is what the difference is.
Yeah, and it's coming up into a time of qualitative transformation. Education is all of the importance. Public access cable television is a great place to get educated.
Absolutely, absolutely.
An autodidactic moment, and it's a big challenge. Thank you for contributing.
Thank you.
Randolph Corbitt.
Always good.
Thank you, Fred, for coming in. Your pleasure. Tune in. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. I have a little thing about public access cable television from 1998 that I would hope might be relevant. We've got to get some sort of a thing going here to pump juice into the Occupy Wall Street thing to where we can get a real change.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for viewing. That's it for now. And thank you, gentlemen, very much. Okay, so I can't seem to get anybody on my page. I just can't get anybody there.
That's because you want the whole page. You don't want to take part of the page and share the page with others. You want the whole page.
I mean, it's comprehensive. I mean, we don't even know. It's synergistic.